If you ever believed the Garden of Eden held only one first love story of humankind, then there is a name that will crack that entire picture open. Lilith, a woman said to have once stood beside Adam, as an equal made from the same dust, filled with the same breath, and then erased from heaven as if she had never existed. Why can a figure vanish from the official version of the tale, yet keep living in midnight whispers, in amulets hung beside a newborn's cradle, in a man's fear when the lights go out, and even in the awakening of modern women? If Lilith is only a demon, why did people need to invent her? And if Lilith was once human, who turned her into a demon? Imagine the first moment of the world, when everything still smelled of wet soil and newborn light. No history, no laws, no must and must not. Only a garden where rivers flowed like strings of a harp, where leaves murmured like prayer, and the sky was so clear you could almost see a breath drifting through it. In some retellings, before Eve ever stepped out of a rib, there was another woman created at the same time as Adam, not behind him, not made from him, not an accessory to anyone. She rose from the earth as he did, carrying a raw kind of pride, as if God himself had placed a spark of freedom inside her. Lilith is not the kind of character who arrives with a gentle halo. She enters the story like a blot of black ink on a white page, the thing every writer wants to hide, yet the more you cover it, the more it shows. Because from the beginning, the conflict ignites in the smallest place, in the question of who is above and who is below, who leads and who obeys. In many folk versions and later traditions, Lilith refuses to submit. She says, "I was made from the same dust as you, so why should I lie beneath you?" A sentence that sounds simple, but in the ancient world, it lands like lightning, striking the very order of the universe. And then, in legend, she leaves. Not driven out, but walking out on her own. Some versions say she spoke the sacred name, a word not meant for mortal tongues, like a key that unlocks the shackles of fate. In a single moment, Lilith becomes a dark bird slicing across Eden's sky, plunging into the desert where the wind burns like the breath of an untamed world. Eden behind her remains green, remains beautiful, remains correct, but to Lilith it is no longer paradise. It is a gilded cage. Lilith's disappearance does not end the story, it begins a hunt. In the legends, God sends angels to retrieve her. Picture it like an old painting, blazing messengers crossing the heavens, the sheen of their wings falling on the desert like scattered starlight. They search for Lilith at the world's edge, where salt seas slam into rock and the wind howls like a starving beast. Some versions name it the deep waters, the Red Sea, a dwelling place for exiles. The angels call her name and command her to return, but Lilith does not return. She chooses the price of freedom, even if that price is loneliness, a curse, and centuries of being retold with hatred. In the harshest tellings, Lilith's disobedience is transformed into a supernatural crime. They say she becomes the mother of night demons, birthing things that drift through darkness, slip into bedrooms, and hide inside the breath of dreamers. A woman who will not submit is easily turned into terror in the imagination of an ancient society. Fear of freedom, fear of desire ungoverned, fear of a voice that will not bow. And so Lilith, from a woman who left the garden, is gradually pushed down into a phantom that stalks the most fragile things of all, sleep and newborns. This becomes even more chilling when you look at how people once protected cradles. Traditions of hanging charms, writing the names of angels, carving symbols like an invisible fence around a child. Why? Because in those times, infants died often. Illness, fever, infection, accidents, invisible storms with no name. When science has no answer, people need a name to hold their horror. Lilith becomes that name. When a baby does not wake up, The mind reaches for a story it can survive. And the easiest story, sometimes the cruelest, is that a woman of the night came. But Lilith does not live only in fear for children. She is also chained to men's fear. Tales of the succubus, the seductive she-demon of the night, the wet dreams that leave a man waking in both pleasure and guilt. All of it forms a swamp of symbols with Lilith at the center like a queen without a throne. When a society refuses to speak desire plainly, desire becomes a demon. When a man cannot bear to admit his hunger can outrun his control, he says something came to him in the dark. In that imagination, Lilith becomes a black mirror reflecting what is forbidden. Time passes, and Lilith sinks into deeper, more mystical layers, especially within Jewish esoteric traditions, where the universe is not only right and wrong, but balance, symmetry, pairs of light and shadow. There, Lilith is sometimes not just a wandering demon, but a force, a principle. She is linked to the shadow side of femininity, something that stands beside the sacred side of femininity in other figures. If one side is protection and nurture, the other is wildness, longing, refusal to be tamed. Not because femininity is evil, but because anything powerful becomes frightening when people cannot control it. And if you look deeper still, you will see a trick of storytelling history. What does it mean that Lilith was erased from heaven? Not that she vanished from collective memory, but that she was denied a place of honor in the popular story. She was pushed to the margins, and from the margins turned into a warning. This is how many cultures treat rebellious figures. If you cannot kill them completely, you blacken them. If you cannot deny them entirely, you bend their meaning. When a woman will not fit the assigned role, she is called names that soothe society. Witch, whore, demoness, danger. Why was Lilith so dangerous to the ancient imagination? Because she touches the weakest points of order. Power inside the family, inside the body, inside desire, and inside birth. Ancient societies survived through reproduction, lineage, children living long enough to become heirs. Anything that threatened children became the highest ranked demon. Anything that threatened marital stability was branded monstrous. Anything that threatened male authority in private space was stamped with the night. Lilith is not merely a character. She is a label pasted onto all those anxieties. In symbolic terms, Lilith is like a silhouette rising from the dark zone of the collective mind. Night is where humans lose control. Sleep, dreams, delirium, fever, panic. Night is also where desire slips beyond the surveillance of the community. So it is no surprise that night creatures in many cultures were female forms. Lamia in Greece, the Roman Strix, medieval European tales of female specters, the alluring and terrifying shapes in other legends. Lilith stands in that same symbolic family as a common denominator. Fear of dangerous beauty and untamed freedom. If the story ended there, Lilith would be only another demon in the museum of myth. What revives her in the modern age is the way people reread the tale. When the world begins asking about equality, about women's self-determination, about who writes history and who gets erased, Lilith becomes addictive as a symbol. A woman who said no to order at the dawn of time. A woman who left paradise because paradise would not let her be herself. In other words, Lilith becomes the image of the price paid by those who refuse to submit. Try seeing the story as a psychological mirror. Eden, symbolically, is not only a garden. It is any system that promises happiness if you obey. The model family, the approved society, the correct image. Lilith is the moment a person realizes that correct is not the same as alive. And the decision to leave, even if it is called wrong, can be the first step toward becoming oneself. That is why, for many, Lilith is not a demon. She is the question that hurts. If paradise requires you to disappear in order to stay, do you still want to enter? Of course, romanticizing Lilith has its own shadow. If we turn her into a perfect goddess of freedom, we miss what matters. She is a symbol of conflict, and every symbol has two edges. Lilith speaks of freedom, but also of the loneliness freedom can demand. She speaks of choice, but also of the fear of punishment for choosing differently from the crowd. She speaks of desire without shame, but also of how desire can be twisted into obsession when it is crushed for too long. To read Lilith in only one color is to lose her real power, the power of a story that will not let you rest. Another layer lies in how humans handle what they cannot explain. Today we know about sleep paralysis, waking hallucinations, vivid nightmares, disorders of sleep that make people feel as if something is pressing on their chest. In many cultures, the experience was once told as a demon attack. Lilith, as the one who comes at night, can be the ancient mind giving shape to a bodily event. And the grief of losing a child before modern medicine could easily become a myth about a child thief. Not because the past was stupid, but because the past needed meaning to avoid going mad with helplessness. And there is something else. Lilith is a figure from the margins, and the margins are where myths grow the wildest. Official stories tend to be fixed, smooth, with clear moral lessons. Marginal stories are alive, shifting, changing with each era's fears and desires. That is why Lilith can be the first wife, the demon, the queen of darkness, the feminist symbol, the pop culture character all at once. Every time society argues about gender, power, and desire, Lilith is summoned again, like a wind chime at the door of night that rings whenever the wind changes direction. If you watch closely, being erased from heaven is not only an event in a tale, it is a mechanism of power. Whoever stays in the story remains in collective memory. Whoever is removed must live as a ghost or be retold in someone else's voice. Lilith is a lesson in that. She is pushed out, yet she does not die. She becomes a demon in the story of those who fear her, and a symbol in the story of those who need her. She is like an ember buried under ash, assumed dead, but one breath of a new era and it glows again. So who is Lilith in the end? If we stand on the boundary between myth and psychology, we can say Lilith is the shape of the defined part inside the human being. The part that will not bow to an order simply because it is ancient. The part that demands equality, not out of hatred, but out of self-respect. And also the part that unsettles others, because it breaks the comfort of a false peace. In the real world, people like Lilith are not handed flowers. They are labeled. They are slandered. They are isolated. And if they remain standing, they become legend one way or another. Perhaps the most frightening thing about Lilith is not claws or bat wings in old drawings, but the question she leaves behind. If you can be turned into a demon simply for saying I am your equal, then is the problem you or the story itself? If a system must erase you to preserve its perfection, is that system truly paradise? And if Lilith was erased from Eden, yet still lives in humanity's memory, does that mean there are truths that cannot be buried no matter how fiercely the official tale tries to cover them? When you turn off the lights, darkness does not create monsters. It only reveals what was already there. Lilith, in a sense, is the darkness in the human story, the place where what is repressed takes form. But darkness is also where seeds germinate. And maybe that is why Lilith never truly vanished. She only changed roles. From a woman who left the garden, to the demon of fear, to the symbol of a question, and finally to a mirror of something deeply human, the hunger to be oneself, even when the price is being erased from heaven. Now imagine again the moment she steps through the gate. No thunder, no angelic army lined up, no sentence read aloud. Only leaves trembling softly, a river's sound fading behind her, and a woman walking into the wild world. Behind her is the place called perfect. Ahead of her is a place that promises nothing at all, yet she walks anyway. And maybe that step, more than every curse spoken afterward, is what makes people afraid and unable to look away. because it asks every era directly. If paradise demanded you kneel, would you stay? Or would you also walk away like Lilith?